Desus and Mero, welcome to the Daily Social Distancing Show.
Yo,
Hey,
Trevor Noah.
good to be here.
Out to the homie Trevor Noah. How you been, man?
I feel like I haven't been as good as you guys, I'm not gonna lie. There is something that I enjoy about watching your show where no matter what's happening in the world, I always feel like the Bodega Boys are gonna keep me feeling like it's not the worst day in history. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because it's probably gonna be worse days in history, to be fair. So
It's very weird. It's very weird. That's our new sass in life. We are now the court jesters to the end of America. Like
I
everyone
like
tunes
that.
in. Everyone's like, "Hey, Jesus and Mero, take our minds off the fact the world is ending." And we're like, "Ha ha ha! Trump's not leaving us. Ha ha."
with the band on the Titanic.
Yeah, but you guys are crushing it because I think you're the furthest thing from being the band on the Titanic because your ship is not sinking. Congratulations, your show got renewed for a third season on Showtime. Let me ask you this: you guys have described the show as it's almost like being on a barbershop or at a barbershop, but with more facts. You know, you cover the news, but you guys cover social media. You cover what the streets are talking about. It feels like, in my opinion, of all the late night shows, your show was shaken the least by the coronavirus because you guys have always been wearing hoodies. You guys have always been like, I mean, you got the sneakers that you've been rocking every single day of your show. Has anything changed for you in a big way?
I mean, just kind of like balancing, work and home life. Because before, like, I can't, like, personally speaking, like, I put everything in a nice little compartment.
Right.
So my office and the studio was work, and then my house was my house where I live with my kids and my wife, and there were two separate entities. You know, like separation of church and state. Now we got the church in the state, and it's like holding a Bible upside down, and everybody's running around all wild. You know what I mean? So that was the only like adjustment. But like as far as like losing the audience and that type of stuff, the show has always been like Desus and I like bouncing jokes off each other and like trying to make each other laugh as opposed to like, selling a joke to you, you know what I mean? So
right.
it's the energy has remained the same, I feel like, because of that.
I think as far as like consuming culture to make the show, it's definitely changed because before it was like, yeah, you turn on the news, you turn on Twitter, whatever, and you take it in and then you talk about it the next day on the show. But you had the outside life, you had New York City to balance that out. So you could go to a bar, you go to the movies, hang out with your friends. Now it's like sit in front of a TV, just death scroll on Twitter, taking all this information, and now go into your sneaker room and report it and make it entertaining to the world. So that's a little draining mentally. So you have to do things to balance your mentals. But other than that, like Mero said, it's basically the same show, and it feels a heightened sense of importance now because people are getting their information from the show. Before it was just like entertainment, and now we got Dr. Fauci on, and it's like the same thing with your show. Before your show was just like, hey, here's some levity and a little information. And now it's like, yo, your show is getting people through this pandemic. And I know you get that the same way.
One of the things I've loved about the show now is the backgrounds. I feel like you guys have to keep this when you go back to a studio if you do, because I love seeing like more of who you each are individually. Like Desus, I won't lie, for like a few weeks, I thought that was a Zoom background.
You know what?
Man, I was like, where do I download that Zoom background of all those sneakers? Because nobody owns that many sneakers.
Bro, like the amount of people that I get, and they're like, "This is a green screen." I'm like, "Yo, bro, look, real sneaker. Like this is a real thing." A real and like you said, it really heightens the show because it's just like, "Yo, look at Desus over there with mad sneakers and stuff. Yo, Mero's in the basement over there." It's just like the backgrounds are indicative of who we are, and that kind of helps when we're talking. So you'll see like Mero will talk about like family stuff and things of that nature, and I'll be over here like, "Yo, this sneaker came out, whatever," and it's a good blend. And then visually, it looks good. It looks different than everyone else because early on in the Zoom, when Zoom got introduced to humanity, we were all looking at each other's backgrounds and we didn't know which way to go. I was like, should I put a potted plant? Maybe I'll do a fern, maybe some books.
Some art.
But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the background. I'm going to stand out. So Room Raider, I want my rating. Okay? Stop fronting on the kid.
You know what I'm saying? This is all carefully curated. This is not, like just random clutter.
Let's talk about your new project. You've done everything. You've made podcasts, you've made TV shows, you've got a live tour that was going around the United States before coronavirus hit. And now you've got a book entitled God Level Knowledge Dots, Life Lessons from the Bronx. I'm not gonna lie, I was like, what does that mean, God Level Knowledge Dots? I've never heard that phrase, I can't lie.
That's just the highest level of information you can get. It's just like, it's casual information you get that will change your life. And it's not that deep when you hear it, but then when you stop and think about it, you're like, yo,
whoa,
wait a minute.
You know what I mean?
That's wild.
Think about it. You know what I'm saying? This is knowledge, but it's in a dark form, so it's gonna penetrate. You know what I mean? Really, and penetrate your third eye and decalcify your pineal gland. You know what I mean?
It's like when you're drunk at a party and someone, or you're high, someone goes to you, yo, if you spell the word stop background, it's a different word. And you're like, wait a minute. And then see, that's how it goes.
You're like, yo, Pots.
You're starting your vision. You're starting your journey,
you know what I mean?
to enlightenment. Now it's just us. It's talking about what we learned growing up in the Bronx. Some stuff that lessons we learned that maybe we learned them, so you don't have to go through that. And then it's kind of a photograph of where we're at in life now versus where we were a couple years ago. Right. And those people we were a couple years ago might not necessarily have been people you wanted to watch on TV. So it's also, it maps the growth that we've had. And it's just us talking candidly on different things in our life. I'm talking about relationships. Mero's talking about families and stuff. I'm talking about people dying. That's my wheelhouse. Right, so, it's just a good collection of us.
I loved some of the topics in the book because I've always been amazed at how common our story can be regardless of where we're from in the world. Like the hood seems like the hood no matter where you are. And in fact, one part of the book is where you're talking about like how the Bronx taught you to be broke. And it reminded me of something my mom said to me when the coronavirus started. And I said, hey, are you okay? Is everything good? Do you need any help or whatever? And my mom said to me, she's like, oh, honey, don't worry about me. I've got a PhD in being broke. I can handle this if things get bad. And it like you guys were talking about that same thing in the book. Is like, do you think there are life lessons that you learned growing up in an environment like the Bronx that somebody doesn't learn in like a good life, quote unquote, that they need to survive today?
Oh, for absolutely. Sure, 100%. If you have never gone to bed hungry, or if you've never had to just drink water so you're not hungry, you know what I mean? You could definitely learn something from this book. You know what I mean? Right. Like if you've never had to like, oh, I want some meat with my food tonight, so let me just, throw it down my pant leg, you know what I mean? And walk out of the store. You're definitely going to learn a lesson in this book. Like this book it's not about suffering. That sounds wild, but it's like, it's really about like, Desus said, like a time capsule to a point in our lives where it was just like, these were not jokes. They're jokes now, but back then it was like, yo, this is real. This is real life. And we have to do this to kind of like survive. And like there's, Desus talks about paying rent on time and all these kinds of topics that are really common across the board. Like, surviving, eating, paying your bills, etc.
I know your chemistry works. Everyone knows when the two of you are together, there's just magic. But to see it in a book, I mean, like, you've also written differently. Mero, you've got the all caps thing, which still throws me off because it seems like you're shouting at me from the pages of a book. But it does make me feel like I'm talking to both of you individually. It really feels like you've captured the essence of Bodega Boys on a page. Were you shocked at how well that worked?
No, you know what? It kind of lended itself because after doing the podcast and then doing live shows and then doing TV shows, it's basically any format we do. We just basically keep the same energy and we vibrate on the same frequency. So It was just a matter of just being in the Google document and just working. Shout out to Google Docs because now you're working on the same thing. And I think if we didn't have Google documents and it was like old school style where it was just like we're just mailing back and forth like a Word document, some of that energy and that chemistry definitely would have been lost. But having a free flowing living document like a Google document where we're both working at the same time and the editors are working and you can see each other working, that lended itself to it being like a stream of consciousness and definitely feeling like a typed out version of the podcast.
Well, congratulations. The brand is stronger than ever before. The book is out. The show is still out. You guys are still successful, still doing your thing. I appreciate you for doing it. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, my dudes.